Today we step back from the Passion of Jesus for just a few moments to consider a picture that was submitted to us by another viewer. Now, before we look at her picture, we have to look at some other pictures that set us in a whole line of tradition. There are pictures of the pregnant Virgin Mary. There's a story told of an old monk who, as he faced praying, he always prayed to his image of God. And he thought that God looked like man because in the book of Genesis, it says that man was made in the image of God. Therefore, God must look like man. And when finally others told him, no, that God is beyond what we can see, beyond our words, beyond our imagination, he started crying and said, but you've taken away the one I pray to. But this changes now, that God has chosen to become man, to become a man like us, a human being, and to come into our world in the way that all humans come into the world, through pregnancy and birth. And so the first picture we look at is a picture of the pregnant Virgin Mary, very obviously pregnant as any woman be, showing the same signs of pregnancy. And it's an interesting little note down at the foot of Mary. Notice the cat that's clawing at her gown. And we're told that the cat is there because there was an ancient tradition that when Jesus was born in the stable in Bethlehem, that a cat also gave birth to a litter in the same cave at the same time. But again, it's the pregnant Virgin Mary telling us that, yes, even though God is so distant from us, God is so beyond us, he doesn't want to be distant. He becomes a man like us. Here's another picture of the pregnant Virgin Mary. Notice the difference in this one, that Mary is obviously carrying the Christ child, it shows, and the Christ child that she's carrying, we almost see, if you want to put it that way, that into Mary's body. And what we see is the Christ child surrounded by light. Whereas the first picture we saw stresses the humanity of the Christ child, while acknowledging his divinity, this one, you might say, stresses his divinity, that he is God even while he's being carried in Mary's womb. And that brings us to the third picture. This is the picture that was submitted. Notice about this picture that if you first look at it, you might think that the Christ child is sitting on Mary's lap. But then, of course, you notice it's not. That the Christ child is being portrayed as we're seeing into Mary's womb and seeing the Christ child as he reigns there. But there's also something a little different about this picture. First of all, the headdress of Mary is very different from the usual veils we see. Also, Mary's extended hands are not the usual position of Mary. So the issue is, where did this picture come from? What's the place, the country, the situation that it comes from? The only suggestion I could find is this. This is a recent copy of an ancient Russian Madonna. And if you notice the veil on Mary, the way it's shaped, you notice the Christ child in her womb, and you notice hands uplifted. It seems like this is the same tradition, the same kind of picture that the last one we saw was. So, but the point of all of these pictures is this, that God has loved us so much, has become one like us, being born of a young teenage girl 2,000 years ago to come among us and live and die as we do.